All right. And today is Mother Monday, where we talk about the divine feminine. And we're going through Swami Chaitanananda's book. Oh, this one's even signed. Chaitanananda's book, Sri Sarada Devi and Her Divine Play. And we're on chapter 17 on Holy Mother's caretakers. And it starts off, every chapter starts off with like a little, I know there's probably a name for this, but a little quote from somewhere. And this one's gentleness conquers the hearts of the cruel as well as the kind. There is nothing in this world that gentleness cannot conquer. So gentleness is a powerful virtue. All right, here comes Stephen. Good. And I'm going to mute everyone, but with my caveat that everybody for any reason can unmute and share anything they'd like to share. But just so we don't have any goats in the background or bells ringing or people yelling at each other.
You hear my music?
Nope. Now I hear nothing but me. Everybody's muted. So if you have anything you want to contribute at all, feel free. More than feel free. Unmute. All right. So gentleness is, he says, says here, there is nothing in this world that gentleness cannot conquer. So a good thing to keep in mind when you're going to battle, that there's nothing in this world that gentleness cannot conquer. And so that gentleness, that patience, that quiet demeanor goes a long way toward ending a fight or an argument. I remember one time somebody that I had just met, they didn't even know me. I didn't even know them. It was my first time meeting them. And they were very angry about something that I had done. And but I'd never met them before. And I walked into the dining room and they just immediately started yelling at me. I can't believe that you blah 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 just went off on me. And I was so taken aback, but I didn't get hooked. I was very, very, very happy. I didn't get hooked, and I just stood there looking at them, kind of just disbelieving, like, really? I have never met you, and we're going to start out at this level? I don't think so. And I remember when they were finished, I just smiled at them, and I said, if we started at that level, I'm just going to stand here and laugh because I have no context for this. I said, why don't we start over and tell me what the problem is and give me an opportunity to answer that first. and then and then if it's appropriate, we can start yelling at each other. And it really made all the difference in the world because we actually became very friendly with each other after that. And I still count this person as one of my friends. And just that ability through that we get from our training, from our own practice, it's nothing profound or special. It really comes from our own practice of this interior space that we're creating when we sit in the shrine of the heart to do our meditations and to sit in that silence. While we're doing that, we're giving ourselves a peace, a calmness that exists within us. We're becoming aware of Satchitananda within, which is that blessed gentleness, that blessed quietude. And when you dwell in that place, it's much more easy to approach the world in an objective sort of way. You're not pulled in emotionally to things very quickly. You don't let your history determine how you're going to act. You're accustomed to watching your desires and to seeing your third partying yourself. And so it's very helpful in that practice for being gentle, being kind, being quiet, and not being hooked by all the things out there that are constantly trying to hook us. Because somebody who's hooked is not in control. So if you're trying to exploit somebody, hook them. And then you can just play their anger until you get what you want from them. All right, so chapter 17, Holy Mother's Caretakers. Holy Mother was the embodiment of modesty and gentleness, love and compassion, simplicity and humility, unselfishness and forgiveness. So, the very embodiment of these things. As a divine being, she was endowed with the preponderance of sattva, which is that perfect balance between action and inaction. Um, she did not behave like other women of her time. As an ideal Indian woman of the early 20th century, she was not demanding or aggressive. She found joy through love and unselfish service. She was extremely modest, but that does not mean she was meek or docile when challenged by injustice or wickedness. She represented the motherhood of God in this age and conducted Ramakrishna's spiritual ministry through her divine power, which overwhelmed everyone who approached her. Nonetheless, as a sweet and compassionate mother, it was not possible for her to say a harsh word to anyone. So she sometimes endured the ill behavior of strangers and the unbalanced disciples. She forgave them as a loving mother does her children. So this just demonstrates exactly what we were pointing to there. Here comes Shrikant. This notion that this kind of spirit, this kind of gentleness, uh, garners a great deal of power, or contains within it a great deal of power. I always tell that story about Swami Vedananda. He used to do all this interfaith work, and at the table of all of the people that would sit around, all the different faith leaders they would sit around. There was lots of crosstalk, and several people talking at one time. And one thing I always noticed is that when Vedananda spoke, said anything, which was very rare, most of the time he was very quiet and just sat there listening. But whenever he managed to say something or to present something, it was the only time there wasn't any cross talking. Everybody would quiet down to listen. And I always thought that was amazing for a couple of reasons. One, just because it spoke to the authority of what he had to say, and also just the fact that because he was quiet and didn't waste words, didn't always have opinions, and didn't always have something to say about everything. When he did speak up, people recognized that there was an importance to it, that it would be something wise, that it would be something that was well thought out, put together. And so, Swami Prabhupada also had that quality to him, that he could walk into a room, as I've mentioned many times, and that he would bring his own atmosphere to that room. He could silence a whole room of people without saying anything. And the way that he could masterfully bring a conversation around a dinner table with 20 men that had strayed on to football or something, how he, in just a simple sentence, could bring everybody back to a spiritual ideal or to a spiritual discussion without being obvious at all, without anybody feeling chastised, and without anybody, feeling like he had done anything. And so these are things that happen to us as individuals when we place ourselves in the presence of the divine spirit within. When we quiet the mind, when we find the chapel or the shrine in the heart, and we sit there and in the awareness of the moment, in the awareness of the divine, the presence, this is how we're changed. And this is how we know that to be our true nature, that our true nature is one of love, one of patience, one of wisdom. And so it's not something that we have to change to become. It's something that we have to allow ourselves to return to, right? And we do that by staying out of the traps of mind, staying out of the mind and being an observer of mind. And that way we can more carefully be in control of ourselves, and also in control of the mind. We can determine what's in the mind and what's not, what direction the mind's going to go and what direction it's not. And really, we do that by interest. You see, we get caught in the mind when we become interested in the thoughts that are there, and we identify with them. We wrongly think that we caused those thoughts, but those thoughts just arise from an organ that excretes thinking, right? And it always comes one after the other, one thought giving birth to the next thought. They're always related. You can't break that string of thinking. That's how we know it's just the wheel of samsara. And it's your identity with it that puts you in control, that makes you be controlled by your mind, as opposed to you controlling the mind. If you can understand that you are the observer of mind and not the activator of mind, then you are independent. You find a great deal of freedom. You can choose to react or not react. You can choose to be caught up or not caught up. It becomes a choice for you rather than you engaging in a form of slavery, where the mind is in this mood, so you have to act this way. The mind is angry, so you have to yell. The mind feels indignant, so you have to insult. That's someone who's trapped. That's someone who is a slave to their own mind. They're not free. They're not in charge. And so here we see in Mother, in the divine feminine, this absolute control over the mind, and this dwelling in that heart of peace, that shrine of the heart, living in the presence, and thereby being able to be gentle, compassionate, modest, and steady, regardless of circumstance. And it's one of her divine qualities, and one of the ones that allowed people to recognize her as being a divine incarnation of God. When she came in contact with people of the wider world and began to act as a guru, she needed people to protect her. Ramakrishna had foreseen her future role as a guru, so he selected two strong and wise companions for her, Golok Ma and Yogan Ma. At Kasipur, just before the master passed away, Holy Mother felt helpless and burst into tears. The master consoled her, saying, "Why should you feel troubled? You will live as you are living now. They, the disciples, will do for you what they are doing for me." All of the master's monastic disciples loved and respected Holy Mother and offered their service when needed. But Swamis Yogananda and Sharadananda especially became her devoted attendants and served her with heart and soul. These two disciples became her trusted caretakers. There's a nice, beautiful picture of Holy Mother there. Look at that wonderful face. Beautiful eyes, just real seeing eyes. Remember, that's one of those things that Pravajika Moksha Prana got from the Divine Mother, those eyes. It really was those eyes that changed my life. Just that you've never had somebody look past my face before meeting her. Everybody always just stopped right here and spoke to this. That time when with Moksha Prana, those eyes, they didn't care about my face at all. They didn't stop at the out. They didn't stop. They looked right inside and made me, in that gaze, made me aware of this inner world, of my inner space. And this also is our natural state, that when we begin to recognize ourselves as innately divine and recognize this interior world that the universe actually is within and not without, then we begin to look at others that way. We look at others and we see in them what we see in ourselves, which is why it's so important for us to know what is inside of us. What are we? What is our nature? How are we put together? And through knowing that, then we begin to rightfully see people. And it's very hard to be angered by people or to be bothered by people when you're seeing their divinity first, when you're seeing that nature of Satchitananda, which exists within yourself from your own experience, to then see that in everyone else, and to always make the highest assumptions first about others, not to make assumptions that come from egoism, that come from separateness, but to assume their divinity, assume their nature of love, assume their tendency toward wisdom, and to speak to that. And this is how we love. This is how we build in our compassion and how we build in our empathy for one another, is by touching that divinity within, so we know what a human being is from our inner experience, then when we see other humans, we assume that same experience in them and speak to that. And through that is how we become equanimous people, people of love, people who are not easily angered, people who are always helpful, always hopeful, always believing, always trusting, because we're not looking to take from anyone. We've realized that the world emanates from within, and there's nothing to get from outside. That our relationship with the divine is our relationship with this moment. And in that relationship, in that divine, beautiful relationship, we find our fulfillment, we find our strength, we find our level headedness. Swami Brahmananda is the next section here. He's really one of the most respected monks ever to have been in the order. He's kind of the monk of monks. Although Swami Brahmananda, as the head of the order, was busy traveling to various places, initiating people and training monks, he always kept an eye on the Holy Mother. Once Holy Mother described her caretakers, Yogananda, and Sharadananda, are my real caretakers. Rakal, Brahmananda, is not of that temperament. He can't put up with difficulties. As an asterisk here says, Holy Mother was referring to difficulties among the women around her and between the members of her family. So she was saying that Brahmananda didn't have that or didn't do well with dealing with problems with the women and family problems for her, because he was the monk of monks. He had renounced those things. And so it says that it was not really in his temperament to take care of that. He can't put up with difficulties. He can look after me mentally or through someone else. He is cast in a different mold. That he was made for different things. So he wasn't a direct caretaker, but he always had his eye on the Divine Mother and her well-being. Swami Brahmananda's reverence for Holy Mother was too deep for words. At the very sight of her, he was overwhelmed with spiritual emotion. As a spiritual son of Ramakrishna, he was often absorbed in an ecstatic mood that made him practically unapproachable. But in the presence of Holy Mother, he acted like a child. Whenever he visited her, he prostrated before her with great love and great respect. Holy Mother affectionately caressed him, touching his chin, and gently stroked his head and chest. Once he received her blessing, he left the room quickly. The mother would send him a tray of sweets, which he enjoyed immensely. Brahmananda truly worshipped Holy Mother as a goddess. Once he remarked, "It is very difficult to understand Mother. She moves about, veiling her face like an ordinary woman, but in reality, she is the Mother of the universe. Could we have recognized her if the Master himself had not revealed to us who she was?" On another occasion, Brahmananda said, "Is it possible for an ordinary being to accept the worship of an incarnation like Sri Ramakrishna?" He was referring to the Master's worship of Sarada Devi as Shodashi in Dakshineshwar. From this one, we may understand that a great fountain of power, what a great fountain of power Mother is. We have seen with our own eyes that Mother takes the sins and afflictions of many people upon herself and gives them liberation. Can anyone but the Divine Mother have this power? Inside, the great ocean of realization. Outside, absolute calm. How ordinary and simple she appears. Even the incarnations cannot keep divine moods under control. Sri Ramakrishna manifested them outwardly, but it is extremely difficult to understand Mother. She has kept us all deluded with her motherly love. This is that notion that I've heard this said about the Divine Mother, that Ramakrishna didn't have the same level of strength, which he admitted. He actually pointed to her as having more divine power than himself. But the way that we really see it is that when these divine moods would overtake the Master, he would just be gone. He would be completely helpless, wasn't able to do anything at that point. And the Divine Mother would have those same moods, would have those same ecstasies, but she would go on making chapatis, go on with taking care of Thakur, just very much like a modern mother, seeing the whole world as her children. And to be able to uh, have such absolute mastery over herself, to experience no resentment, to experience no uh, any of those normal things, no jealousies, no angers. That she often was always, well, she was always willing to accept her lot. There were times when she wasn't able to see her own husband because of devotees and whatnot. And even in that circumstance, she had that woman devotee come and ask if she could take the meal to Ramakrishna. And that was Holy Mother's only time to see Ramakrishna, to see her husband. And without saying a word, she said, "Oh, yes, my child, of course." She was giving up her only time in the day to see her husband so that this devotee could serve Sri Ramakrishna. And you just see that absolute mastery of self in the Divine Mother, always serving and always in the background, drawing no attention to herself, so that there she was, the mother of the universe, not being recognized, not being honored, in the proper way, just carrying on being who she was. And then after the master's passing, people started to notice her, right? Started to notice and to understand, wow, there is a gem here that we have not even recognized. There is the very mother of the universe here, that she is a divine incarnation also. And so we see that to Ramakrishna's masculinity, we have Holy Mother and the divine feminine, both of them bringing a marvelous manifestation of what it is to be divine in this world. And with Holy Mother, it was just that sweetness of being exactly that, the divine mother, the mother of all, and how we're all taught to follow that example, to see God in everyone, that worship, the highest form of worship, is the worship of the divine in each other. And to recognize that first in each other, to understand that that is the nature of each other. And then it's more easy to forgive faults because we see them as mistakes. We don't see them as true intentions, because the heart of a human being is divine love. And the only reason that it manifests differently that is because of the confusion of identifying with mind, identifying with body, and limiting itself, so that its expression of love is no longer equanimous. It begins to give love only to those whom it wants something from, right? And it gets lost in ignorance like that. But the mother was never deluded like that. She saw the beloved in everyone, and she knew herself to be the mother of all. Swami Yogananda. When Swami Yogananda was a young man, then known as Yogan, he was suspicious about the master's relationship with Holy Mother. One evening in Dakshineshwar, Yogan decided to spend the night with the master, with the intention of serving him if needed. Ramakrishna was pleased. After dinner, the master went to bed, and Yogan made his own bed on the floor and slept. Throughout his life, Yogan was a light sleeper. At midnight, he woke up and found that the master was not in his bed. He looked for the water pot that the master used for washing and found it in its proper place. He thought that the master might be walking outside, but could not find him there. Suddenly, a terrible suspicion filled his mind. Has the master gone to the Nahabat to be with his wife? Can it be possible that his actions are contrary to his teachings? Just this this horrible distrust. It's like, because it's his teacher, and it's right for him to be thinking that way. Thakur said, yes, you should definitely test your guru. You should definitely know what kind of person your guru is. And so here we have him spending the night, Thakur getting up in the middle of the night And him feeling this, seeing this, determined to find out the truth without delay, Jogan stationed himself near the Nahabat. But while he waited there and watched the door of the Nahabat, he heard the clattering of the master's sandals coming from the direction of the Panchavati. That's that area of 5 different trees that Ramakrishna had planted in order to meditate under. It was an auspicious selection of trees called a Panchavati. Within a few moments, Ramakrishna appeared in front of Yogan and asked, "Hello, why are you standing out here?" Embarrassed, Yogan hung his head in shame for having doubted the master. He could not utter even a single word. The master understood everything from the expression on his face. Instead of being offended, Ramakrishna reassured Yogan, "Well, you are quite right. You must examine a holy man by day and by night before believing in him." Though forgiven, Yogan could not sleep that night. You know, and that right there, that's our problem. That right there, master, there's more teaching in that line than the rest of the story. You know, that Yogan had doubted the master and had watched and been his doubts had been proven unnecessary, right? And the master compliments him, doesn't get angry at him, says, "Yes, you're quite right. You should definitely watch a holy man closely day and night before you believe in him." But then Yogan couldn't sleep, couldn't let go of it, right? That's egoism, you see. When the divine master himself says, you're forgiven, or you did the right thing, or, don't let it worry you. For it, egoism won't accept grace, because you have to have the humility to accept grace. And so this is what's happening right here. Even from a direct speaking of Ramakrishna, blessing him and saying he was right, he still felt the shame and still felt, the responsibility for this wrong assumption, and he couldn't sleep for it. And so just see that and really watch that in your life. Accept grace, build your life on grace, build your practice on grace. And grace is what allows us to leave the past behind. Grace is what allows us to not continually subject ourselves to the abuse of our own mind, the self-hatred of our own mind, those kinds of things. After his passing away, the master uprooted Yogan's doubt and relieved his feelings of guilt. When Holy Mother was in Vrindavan, the master appeared to her and asked her to initiate Yogan and to make him her first disciple and her caretaker. Later, let me do something here. So, to initiate Yogan and to make him her first disciple and caretaker. Later, Kumutbandhu Sen recalled, as Swami Yogananda began describing this event of initiation, his voice became choked with deep emotion. In conclusion, he remarked, "The image of the master and the mother will never fade from my memory. I realized that both of them were of divine origin, and that they had incarnated in human form out of compassion for the devoted millions." Swami Sharadananda wrote, Swami Yogananda completely atoned for his offense, first by surrendering himself completely to his guru and serving him, and then when the master passed away, by devoting his life to the service of the Holy Mother. So we see there, that's beautiful. Swami Yogananda completely atoned for his offense by surrendering, right? Surrendering is that complete letting go of all of this, having nothing else standing in our way. It's like it's that ability to accept grace. That's how our quote sins, our ignorance is atoned for or corrected. It's through surrender, not through changing our behavior, not through mastering this, that, or the other, not through doing. It's through surrender. Why? Because our nature is divine, and through surrender, the nature manifests. Not through a new revised ego perspective, not for a replacement of a particular sense of self, but by letting go of all of that, letting go of mind, letting go of body, and knowing who we are spontaneously in the moment, by the experience of being, not through being told by mind or being described by body through its attributes, but through a knowing silence, a surrender in the moment. This is how we come to know ourselves. In August of 1886, after the master's passing away, Yogananda went on pilgrimage with Holy Mother. Then in September of 1887, he accompanied her to Karmarpur and stayed there for 3 days. In November 1888, Yogananda went to Puri with Holy Mother and stayed with her there for 3 months. In February 89, he again went to Karmarpur with Mother, who stayed there for a year. After leaving Holy Mother and Karmarpur, Yogananda left for his own pilgrimage and to practice severe austerities. He spent most of his time in meditation. Once a day, he would go out to beg for food. Sometimes he ate only dry bread or soaked water, or dry bread soaked in water for 2 or 3 days at a time. This practice ruined his digestive system. So we see that austerity, we quite often read about that. This austerity it's going to the gym for your willpower. That's what austerity is. Austerity is strengthening your willpower so that you're in charge, so that your emotions aren't in charge, your desires are not in charge, the whims of your body are not in charge, that you are in charge. And this is done by subjecting yourself to things that you might normally choose not to do. Limiting your food for a few days, to practice strengthen your willpower, taking a cold shower, to practice your self-control, to practice your willpower. Just doing something that's difficult for you to do, something that you might rather not do, something that violates your comfort or violates your pleasures or violates your ego in some way. That you do these things every now and then as a means of practicing willpower, so that you get stronger. And why? Because we're trying to get to that place where our yes is yes and our no is no, so that we are people of integrity, so that our words, our actions, and our thoughts can be in alignment, because that is how God manifests. When that channel, as it were, the channel of your thoughts, actions, and words are all in alignment, then nothing is leaking. And then the movement of God in you becomes your movement in the world. And so you become that which you've always wanted to be, actually. You become that person of strength, that person of integrity, that person of knowledge, of wisdom. In 1898, when Holy Mother lived at 10/2 Bospara Lane, a rented house in Bagh Bazar, Calcutta, Yogananda and Brahmachari Krishnalal took care of her and ran all of her errands. Yogananda posted himself at the entrance as a gatekeeper, receiving gifts for Holy Mother and regulating the devotees' visits. Sister Nivedita described the place in the Master as I saw him. It was a strange household, of which I now find myself a part. Downstairs, in one of the guard rooms, beside the front door, lived a monk, Yogananda, whose severe austerities from his youth up had brought him to the threshold of death from consumption in the prime of manhood. To his room I used to go for Bengali lessons. In the kitchen behind worked a disciple, Krishnalal, a disciple of his, actually of the Holy Mother's, and a Brahmin cook, while to us womenfolk belonged all above stairs, with roof terraces and the sight of the Ganges nearby. Holy Mother later commented, Jogan and Sharat belonged to my inner circle. No one loved me as Yogan did. If anybody gave him money, he would save it, saying, Mother will use it for her pilgrimage. The other monks teased him for living in the household full of women. he asked me to address him as yoga, right? That really is something. I mean, especially within Indian culture, for a monk to live in a household of women. One, it talks about Yogan's character, but just as much so, it talked about how the women who would allow it, who would respect him and give him a place in the building, you know. So on both fronts, that was quite astonishing. But you can see that he would have that kind of clarity of mind, that purity of mind, because of this austerity, this amazing willpower that he had developed in himself. That he steered that ship of the mind and body with absolute precision. It didn't wobble in his hand because of that intensity of his practice. Yogananda was so respectful toward Holy Mother that he would not touch her feet when he bowed down, but instead waited until she left the room and then touched his head to the spot where she had been. When asked about this strange behavior, Yogananda replied, "What? I don't have the audacity to keep the mother standing and waiting for me so that I can bow down to her." Right? Look at that humility. It just soaked all the way through him, just all the way through him. That he was so much about the well-being of others that he, even to show them respect, he didn't want to hinder their movement. He didn't need the opportunity to show his respect. When they had left the room, he would go down and touch his head to the floor where she had been standing, or where her feet had been resting on the stool in front of her chair. That's an amazing love right there. That's an amazing love when you are that devoted. We see that in Brother Lawrence in his relationship with God in the divine, that he said, "I would never do anything against his will, that I would never do anything to violate the love of my beloved. I would not even pick a straw up off the floor without his permission." Just that absolute surrender of anything, any egoistic individuality, just given over to God, which in reality is what? Our own very nature. So it's not a loss of ourself into some third party anthropomorphic God that has a separate will. It's a surrendering of our lower nature based on confusion and ignorance to our higher nature, which is the thought and mind of the divine, the beloved, based squarely in love, founded and rooted deeply in wisdom, and manifesting through this being, this isness.
Maharaj.
Yes.
So, we're reading about both willpower and surrender here, and that for me has always been been at times one feels that one needs to do more practice, and the other times it's just can't do it, it's just surrender. So if you can just speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, without willpower, you really can't surrender, because our attachment to mind, our attachment to body runs so deep that when when the mind gets angry, we're just naturally immediately anger. For having that surrender, we have to develop that separation from mind to a certain extent. We have to understand that the mind is not us, so that we can control it, from our perspective, by withdrawing our interest from it. So there's a certain amount of effort necessary to calm the insides, to bring ourselves to that inner peace, right? And it's in that quiet then that we come in touch with the voice of the divine, that we come in touch with the divine will within us. And that's when surrender begins to mature, is when we can hear that voice and we know what we're surrendering to. When we have gotten that separation from mind, so that we have a stronger sense of ourself not being mind. When we've separated ourselves from body, so we have that stronger sense of not being body, then we become more aware of what we are, that we're that divine
Mm.
manifestation. And then we can surrender. Then it becomes an actual act of surrender. The practice itself is surrender in the form of preparing for surrender, right? It's the laying down of the guns, climbing out of the foxhole, you know, going forward with your hands up, waving your white flag. All of that's part of the surrender, but the surrender doesn't happen until you get there and you're standing in line and you're sent where you're going to go. You're completely then out of you're no longer a military individual. You're no longer a fighting soldier. You're now surrendered. You have no power. You have no authority. You have no will of your own. And so that's kind of what we're doing right now. It's like the battle is finished, but we have to lay down the weapons. We have to detach from mind. We have to wave our white flag, wave our white flag, let go of our desires, let go of our insistence on having things our way, even let go of our perspectives of what our role will be, so that when we actually do surrender, we're able to lay everything down because we're in charge of everything. We're in control of everything. And so we can say, I surrender, and we're surrendered. Right. So it's a mixture. As long as we believe we're doers, we have responsibility. And we use that for practicing our austerity, running our mantras, doing our prayers, spending our time in meditation. And then when we come to understand more deeply, then those responsibilities fall away because we're starting to understand the lack of doership. We understand that the delusion of doing actually came because of attachment, that we were so in touch with what the mind was doing that we mistook its actions and its consistency to be our will manifesting in it. But that wasn't what was happening. We had just become such a slave that we were in step with mind, and we assumed we came first and the mind followed. But really, what was happening is the mind was going and we were following. But we saw ourselves as the doer because they would align. We would get what we wanted, but it wasn't what we wanted. It was what the mind wanted. But we had that deep attachment, so we couldn't tell the difference. And so as long as we're in that state, we really don't have the power to surrender because we don't know who we are. We don't know what we're surrendering. But later, when we know of our nature and we have that little bit of wiggle room between mind and body and ourself, then surrender can actually happen. And then it just becomes a lifelong way of being. Actually, at some point, it even stops being practiced. It just starts
So I
being
guess,
what we.
yeah, I remember, I think I spoke before 20 years ago when with Swami Swananda, when I said, oh, and I just feel I need to do more. And most of my life of 20, 25 years of practice has been, I need to do more, I need to do more, and his thing was, well, as long as you feel that you need to do more, then you need to do more. So which he was kind of trying to say that if you have I guess I understand it now, that if you have the sense of doership, then you have to come to the point of like you're saying, of not being the doer in this.
Yeah, I heard a Swami one time describe it as that our practice is really only there to bring us to exhaustion. As long as we believe we can do this, as long as we believe I can realize God, we have to try. It's just this is why I say be so careful about the stories that you tell yourself about yourself, because you have to act those stories out. Whatever stories that exist in your mind for you, any one of them that you identify with, that you think is your story, you're binding yourself to live that out, to suffer that karma. And so we really want to come to this place where we really experientially know we can't do this. We have no means of doing this. From the Christian perspective, the way it was presented to me in church is that even if you live a perfect life, that's just meeting what's expected of you. You can't live a more than perfect life, and that's what would be necessary for you to make up for all of the wrong that you've done, right? And so it's even if we lived perfectly, we would just be what we are. We wouldn't be doing anything extra, right? And so this notion that practice is really there for us to come to the understanding, ultimately, one, this can't be done, which then opens us to the grace and mercy of this divine uh, existence within, our own grace and mercy, the mercy of God, as it were. We become to rely on that more and more. And then when we begin to see that things actually are still happening and still working, even though we have surrendered and given up to that divine will, then we grow. We begin to understand, wow, I really am not the doer. It really is the divine will acting through me. It really is the presence of the beloved animating me. And it's that surrender which allows realization. And that surrender is the very thought of I, the very thought of me being separate from the divine. That is what we surrender. We place that very precious I on the middle of that red pillow and we carry it to the beloved. We bow down and we leave it once and for all. And that is what realization is. That's what realization is. And that's how perfection comes to us. When we come to realize what we have always been, and that all of our desires and notions of difference and separateness were delusions, had no reality, and that all of our doing was really following a deranged mind, a crazy mind that was crazy with me in mind. When we come to see that, then our one grand act of surrender, if we were the perfect student, would be our realization, laying it down. Until then, we keep going through all kinds of gyrations. The ego is endlessly creative and reestablishing itself and re-identifying itself and slipping into the mind with identity. All these things happen. And so until we can offer that grand act of surrender, we we do this continual smaller surrenders. These much in the form of running around saying, "Oh, I'm sorry." Oops, I didn't mean that. Oh gosh, look, I've done it again. Like that. But it's, in the end, everything will be well. Everything is well. And that's part of seeing it. That's part of surrender too. Accepting the moment as it is, accepting you with your faults, accepting you with all of your delusions, and then expanding yourself to become the observer of that entity that you've accepted. You see, a very interesting thing. I listened to that was probably like 2:30 in the morning 2 nights ago. I woke up and instead of getting up to do practice, I struck a bargain with Mother that I would instead listen to a holy YouTube video. So I opened up YouTube, and there was a talk there by Eckhart Tolle on how to dissolve the pain body, was the title. How to dissolve the pain body. And he said the first one is to completely accept it. Feel everything inside as it is, and don't feel like anything needs to be changed. Understand it's all fine. Everything is perfectly well. So embrace your entire self with all your faults, with all your shortcomings, with all of the delusions in there. And then he says, expand yourself to be the container of this thing that you have now accepted. But understand that you are outside of that thing. You are the embracer of that thing. You are not that thing. And maintain that perspective of observance and acceptance. And he said, through that, the pain inside, the self-hatred inside, the struggles inside, will dissolve. Will dissolve in that acceptance, right? Because ego has nothing to react to when there's acceptance. right? When there's non-resistance, there's no ego. The ego has nothing to push against, so it can't get its exercise. So it will dissolve. So it's merely that, again, bringing us back to that famous statement of Swami Prabhupada: in the light of awareness, the knots of our delusion will untie themselves. We don't have to go and untie all the knots ourselves. They will do it themselves in the light of awareness. And so this is why we're always saying, you know, be the observer, be the witness. Understand you are not the contents of the mind. You are not the mind itself. That you are observing the mind. The mind is an organ, and it excretes thought. And it excretes thoughts based on memory, based on sensual input, based on samskara, past experience. But it is not sentient, and it doesn't have a point, and it doesn't have a purpose until you identify with it and then assign it one. All right.
Thank you.
Surely.
Excuse me, Swamiji.
Yes.
Swami Yogananda ji lived not very long, right? Is he the one?
I don't know when he passed away. I'm sorry to say.
No problem. No.
Yeah.
Yeah, he passed young.
Yeah. Love is demonstrated by emotion and thoughtfulness. Regarding Yogananda's concern for her, Holy Mother recalled, every year since that time, after the vision of the goddess at Jagadatri, I have gone home for Jagadatri Puja as often as possible. I used to help by polishing the puja utensils and looking after things. Formerly, there were not many people in the family, so I went home to clean the pots and pans. Later, Yogan got a set of wooden utensils for me. He says, Mother, you do not have to scour pots and pans anymore. He also secured a piece of land to provide for the expenses of that puja. Yogananda's loving service and devotion left a deep impression on Holy Mother's heart. He once presented her with a quilt. When it eventually became worn out from constant use, Holy Mother considered changing the cover and having it stuffed with fresh cotton. But when she gave up the idea, since she thought it would change the look of the gift from her beloved disciple. Swami Yogananda passed away in Samadhi at 3:10 p.m. on the 28th of March, 1899, at the age of 38. Toward the end, he said to Holy Mother, Mother, Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva, and Sri Ramakrishna have come to take me. That morning, while performing worship, Holy Mother saw that the Master had come to take Yogananda. When Yogananda breathed his last, Brahmachari Krishnalal cried out. Holy Mother was upstairs and realized what had happened. She burst into tears and said, My Yogan has left me. Who will now look after me? Because Yogananda was the first of the Master's disciples to die, Mother remarked with a deep sigh, a brick has slipped from the structure. Now the whole thing will come down. Even a divine being like Holy Mother was grief-stricken by Yogananda's passing. The Mahabharata says, at the end of prosperity, there is decline. After union, there is separation. After life, there is death. This whole acceptance, this is something that all of us are going to experience and are experiencing in life. This, when she says that brick has now slipped, that now the whole structure will come down. She understood that he was just the first of all the disciples, and that eventually all of them would go. And in life right now, we begin as we grow older. It's amazing, when I think about it. It's like, this last time, I hope he doesn't watch this video, but one of my good friends I went and spent Christmas with this last year. And, we used to get together regularly, but we're living in different places in the world now. And I remember when I said goodbye and I was, driving the car off, and I looked and saw them out the back window, and waved in the mirror. And it occurred to me, I was like, I hope he's alive long enough for me to see him again. Because we come to that place, especially as you age, where the people around you are aging and you start losing your friends and you start losing family and you start realizing your place in the plank line. you know, that we all have to walk the plank in this life and all of us have to step off the end. And eventually it's going to be our turn. And, this is a brilliant time in life. If you've done your practice, if you've held on to your practice, it's a beautiful time because it's a time when all of the things that you had to force their reality become real of their own accord. You start realizing and seeing very clearly the temporary nature of the world. You begin to see very clearly the body and its difference from you, because you will never feel your age. The body contains the age, the mind contains the age, but you are always free. You are always young. And that same you has always been looking through. And as we grow older, these things become more and more apparent to us. We start realizing that this was a short dream that came and now is going. And so that suffering of mother there, where she saw not just the death, not just the passing of Yogan, but understanding, yes, this entire play, this entire story will fall into history, will fall into the past, but how she accepted that and how she kept working until her very last day, like that. So what is that? Can't find it. There we go.